On behalf of the city, we invite you guys all out here to have some conversations and observations, and to get some kind of public input as to what kind of improvements we can do at this intersection to improve operations, improve the crossing, and whatnot. I have with me Fareed Javindel from the city, and Dan Smolka from the Fourth Floor Coalition, and resident, also with us. So I'll let Fareed kind of give a little bit of a background in terms of what's happened over the last several years and what brought us to today, and then I'll kind of take over to get into the details.
Okay, so what led us to being here today all started with the Caldecott Fourth Floor project and the concerns of the traffic impacts that it might have for Berkeley. And so the Fourth Floor Coalition is a group of neighborhood associations that grouped together and sued Caltrans over funding mitigations to try to offset some of those impacts. Now, Caltrans came to a settlement with the Fourth Floor Coalition. Ann Smolka is here, one of the leaders of the Fourth Floor Coalition, so she may have some comments as well. There's other folks here who are very much involved in that as well. But the bottom line in that process was that when Caltrans agreed to pay $2 million for the improvements, the Fourth Floor Coalition itself doesn't have a direct mechanism to implement those. And so they agreed to give the money to the city to implement improvements on behalf of the neighbors who had come together to reach that settlement. So we as the city are working with the Fourth Floor Coalition, the Transportation Commission, and all the neighbors around the Ashby corridor, basically, and Tunnel Road as well, to identify what the necessary improvements might be that can be funded within the $2 million allotment that Caltrans has given. Now, to give you a little bit of a sense of part of the time that it's taken us to get here, the Fourth Floor project is funded. The funding is going to the Contra Costa Transportation Authority as the lead agency for that project. So they, in partnership with Caltrans, are the ones who are delivering the Fourth Floor project itself. So we had to have an agreement set up between Contra Costa Transportation Authority and the Alameda County Transportation Commission to be able to take the settlement funds from them, and then we, the city, when we incur costs associated with this project, will submit reimbursement requests to the Alameda County Transportation Commission, who will hopefully approve all of those expenditures, submit to Contra Costa for payment, and then they will finally cut the city a check. So a lot of contracts had to be set up between all the agencies to make that happen, and we're thankful that that process is finally behind us, which has allowed us this year to really start working towards actually delivering the projects. And so we are trying to take an approach where what we have is locations that were agreed to through some neighborhood input, working with the Transportation Commission, went to the City Council to identify a list of locations, some with some very general ideas of what sorts of improvements might be possible, others very specific, such as on Tunnel Road, implement city or county bike plan projects that are already identified and in those bike plans. That's pretty simple. Just go, pull that out and finish up the design and build it. Other locations, such as Ashby and Hillegass, we have an objective that's been identified, and that's an objective that's still subject to further input, which is part of the reason we're here today, that says we'd like to improve the bicycle and pedestrian crossing of Ashby. The concern being that if there's more traffic coming through Ashby because of the Fourth Floor project, we may or may not be able to reduce that traffic, but we want to reduce the impact that it has on people being able to connect within the neighborhood, just being able to cross the street so that it's less of a barrier. So that's the general concept of what we want to do, but then we want to understand what the concerns are, because there's a lot of different things that we can do, and we'll talk about some of the possible improvements that can be done, but each of them, pretty much anything we do, has pros and cons to it. We need to get Caltrans approval one way or the other. We want to make sure that whatever solutions we recommend are addressing as much of, if not all of, the concerns that the neighborhood has. So if it's just we want to get pedestrians across and bikes across, that's one thing. If we want to do that and not have cars able to cross, probably that's something we can do, but is that desirable? Do we want to restrict cars, allow some movements, not other movements? So there's a lot of different things that we can do, but before we start to recommend particular solutions, it's really important to us to understand exactly what the concerns are so we don't solve the wrong problem. So primarily we want to be out here to listen today, and we'll certainly give you some input on things that, based on our conversations with Caltrans, sound like they might be feasible. We might get approval from Caltrans, what things typically are doable or not, and what sort of tools we have at our disposal. But I want to be really clear. I know in the past there was a recommendation to put in a traffic signal here to solve some of these same problems, but that turned out not to be something that people were comfortable with, and those secondary consequences I talked about were big issues. So that, that project went away, and this isn't version 2 of that. This is going back to square one at a certain level and saying, let's make sure we're all on the same page as to the problem definition, so that when we come to that solution, we're all solving the same problem. So,
I have a question.
Yes.
So it's talking about square one. Why is it this intersection and not Regent or Benvenue?
The primary reason for calling out this intersection is that it's bike boulevard. So the expectation is there's a concentration of bicycle traffic here that you wouldn't necessarily have at other intersections. Now, one of the things that, looking at our data, because we've done some traffic counts at the intersections that have been identified, so at Hillegass, the next walkthrough we're going to have later this afternoon is at College itself, so we have counts there of cars, bikes, and pedestrians. And so we see a fair number of bikes using College, which may not be a very bike-friendly street, but maybe they're there because they can't get across at Hillegass. So this crossing is something that is in the city's bicycle master plan, as we need to facilitate bikes being able to get across. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution to how do you get bicycle boulevards to cross arterials, but there is a clear desire to make some kind of improvement so that the bike boulevard functions for bikes. One of the things that Eric Anderson, who's our bicycle pedestrian planner for the city, is here today, he made comments also, is that in facilitating bikes being able to get around town, we don't want to simultaneously be facilitating cars to use the same roadways. So as an example, Virginia is another bike boulevard in the city of Berkeley, and next to the BART station there's a diagonal diverter. A couple blocks further up Virginia there's another diagonal diverter. Bikes can get through those, cars cannot. The idea is if you do those sorts of things, you can take the stop signs off those streets, but they still won't be attracted to cars because they don't have a through path. Whether or not the same solution is one that we would necessarily want to apply here, or that you would want to apply here, because that's the real question. We could get into that, but the basic idea is that yes, it's a bike boulevard. That's why the City Council, the Transportation Commission, and the folks who came to those meetings commented on this one being a location that was of interest. So the prioritized list that the council came up with, our hope is we'll be able to do everything on that list that is a Tier 1 project. That list actually includes more than $4 million worth of projects going to Tiers 2, 3, and 4. Those are unlikely to be funded out of the fourth floor settlement money, but we're going to go as far as we can. Tier 1 is the ones that we have, that Jeff's going to be able to talk to you in terms of the list that we're working from now, and we've labeled those A through M. This one is location M, and they're in priority order, and that was just the order that the council and the commission gave us. And so we're definitely hopeful we can get to this one. We're pretty sure that if things go the way we'd like, we'll definitely be able to do something here. But that is a consideration. This is towards the end, and to be able to do something, we need, first of all, consensus that the neighborhood is in general agreement on what to do. We need Caltrans approval, and then we need to have sufficient funds to do it. So that's an issue that we're discussing with all the groups to make sure that any improvements that we're doing are affordable, approvable, and something that everyone wants. So, question?
Being a bicycle rider, I'm wholeheartedly for these bicycle boulevards. Wonderful thing. However, they tend to be a benefit perhaps to healthier people who can ride bicycles. I'm curious about the library where children cross on their own, where elderly cross and are not as nimble perhaps as athletic people on bicycles. Is anything going to be done there, or is that going to, for instance, just the double lane coming up Ashby during certain peak hours for 3 blocks here is a nightmare. I've seen people hit here, and you know, why is that kind of being neglected where we have a public library and this is perhaps given more attention?
I certainly don't want to diminish the importance of the concern there. And I think that's part of, as I said, we had a $4 million list of projects. We're not going to be able to do all of them. So there's definitely a recognition, and even that is not an exhaustive list of all the needs. There are definitely more needs. So while that is definitely something that we would love to be able to improve, it's not on the list that we've been given to work with.
But you guys are aware of those issues?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
One simple thing that the city could do at no cost is to put the parking places back between 4 and 6, because that speed lane that happens between 4 and 6 makes crossing even dangerous, especially at Avenue, but particularly at Hillegass, because people go really fast up. And I think you've done accurate counts now to actually measure. I happen to have been at a planning meeting, and they said that when they removed parking places above College Avenue, these were supposed to be, when they removed the restrictions, our restrictions were supposed to have been removed also at the same time, but for some reason the city put them back. And I'm sure Gordon Wozniak will back me up on hearing that. A resident who lived on Ashby above College Avenue said that they were supposed to be put back in parking places. That, just between 4 and 6, would make this intersection a safer intersection, even without the hawk light. So we need to have more protection. If you cannot do the hawk light right now, we need more protection. This should be a safe route to school. There's 2 mandates that should be followed here. One's to Bicycle Boulevard, but the other is the safe routes to school. Because kids go to Willard from here, and they all go to high school and
So I think we've all probably almost been run down these crosswalks, and we need some kind of light there. Everybody, I think, would agree to that. I got to go soon, so I just want to know, can you give a little bit of information on the difference between the Hawk and the RRF? But the videos, they both seem like they're workable. Is there anything you guys do?
In a very simple sense, the RRFB, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is actually exactly what has been installed at Ashby and Ellis by Malcolm X School. And we also have a couple of them in front of the Ed Roberts campus. That's essentially a warning device. So a pedestrian can push the button and will activate a flashing light. That light is not traffic control. It is to alert motorists that a pedestrian is there. The pedestrian has the same right-of-way in the crosswalk that they would have had with or without it. So that it's very effective in drawing attention and alerting motorists that there's a pedestrian there. You're still relying on them to obey the law that already exists and yield to the pedestrian.
Is that the flashing light is on the...
Not in the roadway.
It's just overhead
the
flash.
rectangular rapid flashing beacon, it's a pole-mounted device. It's like a light bar on the top of a police car. It's about what it looks like. And it flashes very rapidly. And so, as I say, it's something to notify drivers that there's pedestrians there. The hawk signal...
Anything about bikes in the rapid flashing?
They're not designed to serve bikes. We can use them. The bikes would have to push a button to activate them, generally. So we've got some locations where we're kind of working with that. The West Street Bike Path has some at Delaware, where the path intersects Delaware. You can push the button, it'll activate them, but it's the same as a pedestrian.
From a legal standpoint, it doesn't provide bikes right away.
It does not provide right-of-way. It's purely notice that someone is there.
And it goes off every time it's pressed.
Every
There's
time
no
it's pressed.
delay, so at rush hour you could simply press it over and over and block the street, right?
Yeah, if the cars yield, which they should, but we know the reality. Now, the hawk is different in that regard. Now, we'll get to the next question. But the hawk starts with a flashing yellow, goes to a flashing red, goes to a solid red. So that is an active traffic control device. Cars must stop, period. Whether or not there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, they must stop. You can get ticketed for running a red light if you go through. So that's an active traffic control, and that's the primary difference. We'll talk about some more nuances about it, but really that's the big thing. We have one that's a...
Is that the Hawk?
The hawk is the photograph.
Is this one? Okay.
Push button activated. We can also activate it for bikes with a loop in the pavement or some other treatment, and we can talk about how you do that in a way that bikes can trigger it, but cars cannot.
Yes.
As I understand it, the hawk signal is designed and approved for use on crosswalks and paths, but not for intersections. So, can you describe whether or not that would mandate a street closure?
It would not necessarily. The important point there is the current California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is the Caltrans standard on what types of devices can be used, where they can be used, and how they can be used. With regards to a hawk signal, it talks about a hawk signal should not be used within 100 feet of an intersection. It doesn't mean it can't. It just means that generally they're not recommended for intersections. Now, the city of Tucson, which was one of the pioneers of hawk signals, has used them extensively at intersections, primarily where their bike boulevards and bike routes are. And you know, for some traffic engineers, hearing that the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices decided to say you shouldn't use them at intersections was kind of mind-boggling, because we said that's kind of where we primarily want them. So that's definitely a conversation to have with Caltrans, but Caltrans has not yet said no, so it's still an option. With regards to intersections, the question then becomes, when it's activated by a pedestrian or a cyclist, then what do the cars on the cross street do? Do they have a free pass to cross the intersection? Do they not? And we can talk about, if we do any types of traffic controls with regards to cars, do we let them do all the same movements they did before? We have intersections, Channing and MLK, for example, where the cars have to make a right turn. If that's the case, then that really reduces the conflict. You've been waiting back there.
A certain small proportion of drivers obviously got their license from a Cracker Jacks box and can't follow simple rules. And so they go through, and I've almost been hit here a couple of times by people whizzing through, even though I'm in the crosswalk. What about a camera to find these people and find them and maybe put them in jail if they keep doing it, or take their licenses away?
So I don't mean that as a complaint, I mean more as some way of, I'm in agreement here, that how do you enforce these people unless it hurts somehow? And it hurts from either a fine or some way. I don't want to make another blockage like the Bend Avenue because it's our only cross through, but it's got to hurt somehow so that motorists actually obey the law and allow people who are walking and bicycling to just go along with their day. And so that's me. I'm for keeping it a cross through, but in a way that's actually being obeyed, and so everybody can go about their business. That's just my piece. Thank you.
And apparently related to that, I live down on Hillegass, have cats. People will sit here trying to get across, and they wait for a gap in the traffic, and then they gun it, and they don't slow down in the next block. If they had lights that let the pedestrians across, and people in cars were permitted to cross at the same time, that would get rid of the big safety hazards from my point of view.
Because now the only way you can get across is if you wait for a pedestrian or a bicyclist to run interference for you.
Yes,
right.
That's what you say, yes, and then you back up. Okay.
In the last maybe 15 months, I've called emergency services 4 times because people have been struck in the crosswalk here, including a woman who was on her bicycle with a less than 18-month-old child. And at one of the Transportation Commission hearings, they said that, we stated it earlier, that there was a discussion about putting a regular stoplight, and the neighborhood nixed it at the time. And I'm wondering if this issue has been risen to such an extent that maybe now we should simply have a stoplight here at this intersection, because if we're going to go with the hawk system, it's basically a stoplight, flashing yellow over the red. And to make it clear for the residents and clear for children, I have a vested interest because my children cross here 5 or 6 days a week. and they go to the library on the other side here, the Claremont Library, probably 3 or 4 days a week minimum. So what about also including a regular stop?
You said it was vetoed, but how would we get that back on the discussion?
Well, when council approved the project list, they, looking at what had been previously rejected, they said we shouldn't spend any resources on studying a regular traffic signal.
How long ago was that?
That one was, I want to say 2007. It was before I joined the city. I think that's correct. Now, how could you get it back on there? The specific direction was not to study a regular traffic signal. It's conceivable to put something in that is physically looks like a traffic signal, but the way you program it operates in specific ways. So, we can have traffic signals that if there's a red arrow, it prohibits right turning red. We can control how much time a particular movement gets. So if the concern was that by putting a traffic signal you're encouraging through traffic, you could essentially meter the north-south traffic by only providing a very small amount of time for them to cross the street. When they get the green light, they don't have to gun it to get across, they just go. But you only provide enough time for 2 cars, 3 cars per cycle, whatever is reasonable within what the neighborhood considers appropriate.
The reason that the main regular light was vetoed is because it defeats the purpose of a bicycle boulevard. What it does is it increases the car volume on the street. Already there's incredible car volume because it's the only way to get across, as we heard, unless you come from Bedford. But at any rate, that's why it was vetoed, because this is a bicycle boulevard. It's supposed to be accessible for bicyclists. So,
But I think most of the people who are driving it still live here, and I think maybe I would vote to revisit that because I agree that
the hawk light will also get you
bicycle or hawk light, as interesting as these are, will not be as good for bikes or as good for cars. It will create a terrible backup and diversion of people turning. Oh, I'm not going to deal with this traffic. I'm going to go to Safeway. All those kind of decisions will still happen. Whereas if you make a light here that's a sister light, so it's timed with that one. So when that goes off, this goes off 2 seconds later. Basically, it'll keep this clear. Pedestrians and bikes go, cars go, and then it changes. And the traffic will be laminar, and the bikes will be laminar. And yes, they'll have to wait, but they do that in several other major streets in the city.
So there's so many kids on this block, and
They
this
would cross
already
with the
gets a
light.
very no, not just. I mean, playing out here. I mean, there's so
I don't
many
think it-
cars that are really using this street that aren't using the streets next to it, and they have a big share.
And they don't use college. They don't use college because the timing of the light at College in Ashby, which I hope you'll visit, sucks. And they're backed up almost all the way to Alcatraz in busy times. So they cut down Woolsey and come zipping down here. I mean, just come and sit on my front porch and you can watch how the cars come in the afternoon and in the morning. They don't want to be on College Avenue, which is supposed to be a major route. It doesn't have stop signs all along because the timing at Ashby and College was terrible. So that needs to be part of your puzzle too.
My major concern with a stoplight right here is because just on this block right here, which is where I live, there are 17 children. And we do not let our children in our front yard because my son almost got hit because there's so many cars here. This is the only way. And frankly, I just go down Russell and go down to Telegraph because I hate adding to this flow. And so my huge fear, and I'm a biker too, I want a safe way, but I do not want, I mean, I can't even back out of the car out of my driveway without getting hit almost every day. So, I appreciate that you need a little shortcut, but there are plenty of ways. You can go down Telegraph, and Telegraph has stoplights, so that's my personal opinion. We don't
comment about gunning it, but more of us who think that there's more gunning and speed if you do not have a light, and it will be calmer and more orderly with the light.
Right. No, I totally respect that, and I know nobody wants it to be blocked off, but I'm envious of the people who have blocked off because I'm sure you've all had children and maybe they're grown now, but it's terrifying. And, pets have been killed, and this is a really, really busy, and look at the data of how many cars go by here, and it's just going to triple. Or quadruple.
Definitely acknowledging that concern about a light having the potential to facilitate cut-through traffic, and that's not something that's desired. If people wanted to pursue a light, I would say at a minimum, we'd look at what the volume of traffic using this street is now, and how much you want that to be reduced or capped, and then you set up a light so it's metered to allow no more than that target volume of traffic. Anyone know who shows up just ends up waiting a long time at the light. So it's doable if that's what everyone wants to do. But I think it's
also effective in that goal, you're saying?
Yeah, because if you have a light that only provides, a few seconds to cross, the bikes, they can get across, and so you would hold it all red. So cars have to stop, but there's still time for the bikes and pedestrians to clear the intersection. Because the assumption is that you would provide a light that's green long enough for a pedestrian to cross the street at about 3.5 feet per second. That's probably more time than what you want to allow for cars, because that would have too much capacity for cars to go across. So what you would have is a light that turns red for cars, but a separate bike or pedestrian signal that still holds it green long enough for them to cross, but not for the cars to cross. So
that would irritate the drivers.
Well, once again, everything we do has potential consequences.
So Fareed,
yes.
Sorry I'm late, but is there a way to do it so that the light only turns when a pedestrian or a cyclist presses a button?
So
you may have said that already, I'm sorry.
No, that's a perfectly good question. So the light could be activated only by a pedestrian push button. If we want the bikes to be able to do it, we do a bike channel that is like 4 feet wide. A car can't drive through it.
There's a bike at like Dwight and something, right above Shattuck. There's a thing that juts out that bikers can press without getting off the bikes.
Yeah, you can do something like that. I'm kind of walking all over Jeff's presentation here, but if you look through the handout, we've got in here. So Jeff can probably
I can explain this. If I kind of take a few. There's not enough for everyone. So if you look at this is actually a plan of the intersection. This is just an idea about what a potential bike and pedestrian enhanced crossing could look like. North being.
Could you hold it up so we can see?
Yeah, come on in. I'll show you. I kind of need to point to it in order to understand what's going on. So make sure the north arrow is pointing that way. So what we have, what we're showing. I'm an engineer. I look at things in plan view, so bear with me. So what we've got here is more or less a configuration of a channelized bike crossing, similar to what's at Channing and Martin Luther King Jr. Way, with the introduction of pedestrian heads crossing Ashby. Those are those little figure 8 looking boxes, with overhead flashing beacon hawk beacons for Ashby traffic, so that when a bicyclist comes down the street here, they have two concrete islands that only a car wouldn't be able to fit in. They would trigger the hawk beacon or some sort of pedestrian or bike actuated.
Because the sensor's in the ground.
The sensor's in the ground. And then pedestrians would have a button to cross Ashby.
And cars can't go over that sensor.
They won't. They wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't be exactly.
Yeah.
And that reduces the amount of parking.
That would the one of the drawbacks with that it would require a couple spaces to be removed on each approach, just to allow for cars to get around it. The other
motorcycles, would they be able to squeeze their way into the?
They could.
They probably could, but it's not possible.
Wouldn't that be illegal?
Yeah, so it would have to be designed so that a vehicle couldn't take it at 25 miles an hour, but they could maneuver around that area. And what's shown on the outside with the arrows are potential turning movement prohibitions that we could also evaluate while looking at the whole block in terms of what's going on in Benvenue and Regent and whatnot, to make sure to provide a safer crossing for bicyclists should that be necessary with the amount of traffic that's turning, as well as what are the needs of the residents to get through. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that if we were going to try to or suggest or even evaluate eliminating traffic movements across Ashby or left on Ashby, we would look at everything to make sure there's still a way to get across that's not going to take all the traffic here and push it onto another street. I mean, it's not just the improvement would be a bike improvement here, but it would have secondary changes to changing the traffic movements at other intersections like that.
So it appears as if 4 parking spaces would be lost at this and 6 at that side?
These are actually parked cars. These boxes.
Right, so parking spaces now
they're not there. It's
just
it would depend on how long the actual the concrete area is. So this is just something. This is just a sketch. We'd have to look at it. We are doing parking occupancy surveys, and we would do supplemental surveys to make sure to only take what was necessary and evaluate it with as staff and with involvement of everyone here and all the rest of the public here today. This is just a sketch, like I said. This could be with a hawk beacon. It could be with some sort of pedestrian or bicycle actuated signal. It could also be with an overhead flashing yellow beacon with the RFB type actuator. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. These elements can kind of work with all of them.
So can you describe when a bike triggers this, what happens under the 3 turning restriction
Okay,
scenarios?
so these turning restriction arrows are purely for vehicles. Bikes would be able to turn left, straight, or right.
One of those,
bikes can go left, right, or straight in each one.
But to describe what happens, I'm a bike going straight and a car can go left. What happens?
What we would do is we would add signage to alert vehicles that bicycles have the right of way. And that would be on some of the poles that are around the intersection, potentially even in and around what we do in the middle there. We still have to evaluate exactly.
Question?
We would not sign.
It's not on the diagram.
Finish.
Go, Dave.
Answer my question before you get to Robert's. So, restriction 2, where you can go straight or right. What happened?
We actually just backing up. We did do counts at this intersection that are in the packet that I gave you guys all. The amount of bicycle traffic in the peak periods is on the Hillegass approaches is about the same as vehicles. Let me just state that first, so everyone, it's about the same, and which is consistent with a bicycle boulevard. When there's
Say that again.
the amount of bicyclists and vehicles on each approach during the peak periods is approximately the same. Same amount of bikes as there are vehicles.
This one says 81 and this one says 50.
That's the total intersection. If you look at the red numbers, that's the actual bicycle vehicles on the roadway on Hillegass. I apologize.
So this is the bikes or vehicles or pedestrians per hour during the morning peak, the afternoon peak, the weekend peak. And so it's the number moving in each direction, lefts, throughs, and rights. Yes?
Well, these are lovely ideas. It sounds lovely, but right now we have laws, right, for crossing, and nobody obeys them. So how do you put all this stuff up, and people say, fuck you, right? That's what they say when they go by. I've seen people drive around women with children in the crosswalk. I'm sure other people have seen it too, right? So all this stuff is lovely.
That happens at
it's
all
lovely stuff.
crosswalks.
You put all the lights you want up, but how are you going to enforce it? Where's the money for enforcement?
Well, there's the only, as Fareed mentioned earlier, the hawk signal, it does provide a solid red phase for vehicles with signage saying when this is red, you stop for pedestrians. It's a forced stop for that movement, and then it becomes a yield.
But if they don't enforce it, it's all a waste of time.
Well, it's actually just like every other traffic signal would be enforced the same way.
Well, then you're wasting your time if there's no enforcement. I mean, people just don't care. So how you
for red lights most of the time?
Well, exactly. I'll never say that.
No, red lights.
That's what he's talking about.
There's a red light component to a hawk.
The hawk is a red light.
And so is the traffic lights. The traffic lights are red lights too, right?
Yes.
People tend to stop more for traffic lights.
That's correct.
And it looks exactly. If you look at the video and the images,
The
it
hawk
actually.
light is a traffic light.
Sorry,
I know he said that. It controls traffic and you can get fined for doing
it operates similar to a traffic signal. They've tested the effectiveness of these treatments in a lot of places, and they are the red vehicles stop for the red lights. They may not stop for the pedestrians, but they stop for red lights. So it is an effect. Let me go back to Dave's about there's something we would study in terms of the geometry of the vehicles versus the availability of what the bikes can do. Typically, it'd be signage and striping, alerting both the motorists and the bicyclists what to do when. And that's with signage potentially doing something like the green bike striping and other channelizing features that you would find in any sort of bike vehicle dual-use roadway, if you will. So I don't have all the answers because we have to study it and figure out what's the best geometry, but that's something that is
I would jump in. I mean, it sounded to me like the question was about, with this operational configuration, what are the conflicts between different users at the intersection? And the answer is, if left turns are permitted out of the street, then you have a bike continuing forward and a car turning left, and that's a potential conflict that we need to analyze. Yeah. So that I think that's the answer to the question.
Right. I need to take off real quick, just if I can make a quick comment. I don't know if everyone knows the history of the boulevards. Oakland's approach to bikeways is put the bikeway on the major arterial. Berkeley decided decades ago, no, we're going to create this network of bike boulevards off the arterials to encourage bike travel. And it raises, that different approach raises this very issue. This isn't a Hillegass Ashby issue. This is Berkeley's approach to encouraging bicycling that's different than most cities in this country. And so if we can't solve this, the whole boulevard network blows up. And we start taking out parking on College to put in bike lanes. We start taking out parking on Telegraph to put in bike lanes. We're doing what Oakland is battling to do right now. Berkeley's taking a different approach. They have a higher bike road share. They can say, we're smarter than Oakland because this is working. This is part of that solution. So I think that's an important concept, whatever the word is. And the other thing is, Caltrans has a complete streets policy. It's their job to make this intersection safe for walking and bicycling. They can't say no to that. And that's new. It's a new thing with Caltrans. It's a new state law. And this is a great opportunity for us to hold Caltrans to their commitment.
Yeah, and we've met with Caltrans on numerous occasions, and they're for a safety improvement that would make it an easy, better crossing. They're on board 100%. Now it's just a matter of figuring out what everyone that is affected by this installation wants, and then we'll take that to the next level with Caltrans.
Since you're here, are you with the Bicycle Coalition?
Yeah.
So, what is the Bicycle Coalition's opinion on the Channing and MLK light? Because I know you have to go right? You can't go straight or left.
You can go straight if you're on your bike or walking.
No, I mean from a car perspective. Right. So that works well. Because I don't know, I hate to, I got your point earlier about looking at the neighboring streets. It's almost like maybe, you can go right at Benvenue. Maybe you can only go left on Hillegass.
You can only go right Benvenue for 1 block.
Right. Well, no, but you can get there from here. Anyway, it's just a thought.
That's right.
Sort of.
Do you have signage that reminds the people who somehow gotten their license and don't know that they're supposed to start for sidewalks?
Buffy, can you speak up? I didn't hear
Do you have signage that reminds people that have their license but don't know that you actually have to stop for a pedestrian? Just a few hours ago, I was trying to cross Ashby there, and I stick my hand out and go like this to tell them.
Do one of these and then do one of these. I know how to do it.
But I do this, and this woman on her phone blasted through. 3 people blasted through before someone finally stopped.
I think everyone would agree that happens a lot. Anytime it happens once, that's more than it should happen.
Yeah.
We agree with that. And one of the main objectives for this is to put something in place. Find a solution to make that, to minimize that as much as you can from a legal perspective.
Do you think those ones in the middle of the street help, or have you found?
Yeah, the in-road signs that mounted on little bollards 3 feet high, yield to pedestrians and crosswalks, state law. Those are effective. We have to be kind of careful where we put them, based on the volumes of traffic and the turning, because they get hit and knocked down, then they become a hazard. So some places we can do it.
Have you seen the one up at the top of Russell? It's smashed to pieces. So not effective. To say it's effective, I doubt it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Location is important for this.
How about the flashing lights on crosswalks like a button?
The ones that we have in the pavement have been a real maintenance problem, and so that's why we're migrating to using the rapid flashing beacons, which are more visible and easier to maintain. So that's the direction we're going. That's the equivalent of those. Yes.
I love all the things we're talking about here, different ideas. I just want to reiterate, I know it'll be a while before we get something final. Can we do something soon, like Marguerite had suggested about having the parking here, and another suggestion about the signs about yield to pedestrians? That stuff could happen kind of quickly, relative to this whole getting a hawk light in.
In terms of physically being able to do it, I think that we'd have to have some conversations with Caltrans in terms of whether they want parking restrictions or not, and make sure when we're analyzing the intersections what that's going to do to the traffic capacity going through the intersections. Because if we don't have the peak hour extra lane, we need to know what's the consequence going to be. Is it still going to work, or is the traffic going to back up twice as far?
you know, until we get to, maybe it's a year or two before we get the hog lights, and we still got kids walking across these crosswalks.
No, it's a valid question, definitely something to look at, because we're having to cross multiple lanes of traffic.
What's my literature?
Police departments can do sort of pedestrian things like that. It tends to be, often one time. Working with us in the transportation division, where we kind of plan the physical changes, when we really like to see that is if we just implemented something, get them out there, set people's expectations that they need to follow those new guidance devices, whatever it is, immediately, rather than let people get into bad habits. So we would certainly encourage that.
Following off the picture, parking right away, some yellow strips and pedestrian crossings must stop. And it's kind of metallic, so when the car kind of runs over it, they ran over it. That's probably very easy enough for you to call Caltrans on the phone and say, hey, you want that to say, or it's a state highway, we don't do
state highway, we have to get an approach. So but that's something that theoretically, if we see they could approve that one pretty quickly, or once they approve it, immediately. The question is, what do we do then in terms of maintenance? When they don't repeat as much, we still end up replacing about 3 times a year. No, I'm not contesting the value there whatsoever. It's just how much resources do we have to put in. And so then it's where do we actually put them? And I'm not saying that this was that most maintenance. It might be a good place. Not only that, we just have to
later on.
What we heard is we're not going to get everyone to obey all the circulation laws. What we can do is take the people who believe they are reasonable and just be careless or forgetful and influence them. These things are very hard for us to do. But if we get the majority starting to behave better, that's at least a step in the right direction. So we'll take what we can get. Yes?
I just got here because I couldn't leave my office until just now. But I live 3 blocks that way and I've worked 2 blocks that way. So I'm in this area all the time. And it seems to me like this intersection is really linked to College and Ashby. Have you talked about that at all? Because I have, for years, I have been trying to say, retime the light at College and Ashby, because the people on Ashby, most of them don't stop at that intersection. And a lot of them run the red light, because I'm crossing that intersection all the time. If you get everybody to stop up there, there won't be the speed here. And the other problem is, the people coming this way on College get backed up when there's traffic, like through 3 lights, while Ashby is empty and people are just zipping down the hill. And so if you can get someone to retime the lights at College and Ashby, that's the solve. I would say 50 or maybe 75%.
Something useful that doesn't have to do with this intersection, but does have to do with that intersection. As we're looking to upgrade that intersection, one of the most important things that we will be able to do is add vehicle detection. Operating on that intersection right now is operating on a 3-time signal operation, which means it's not traffic responsive. Counts have been done and determined based on those counts what's the optimal allocation of time between approaches. You can have this street closed, no traffic coming at all, but it would still get a green light because it's on a fixed time. If we put in detection, it can be traffic responsive. So that particular concern, I think, we can definitely address. So putting in the detection so it can detect vehicles and respond will help a lot to optimize the traffic flow. So that's definitely one thing that I think is do there. No, they will enforce things.
I know they come down taxes. It's going to be exciting to get here, turn on the lights, and then get it. Say it again? Well, that's it. That's it. What use is that? What use is that?
I'm trying to work with them on making sure that we're doing things that are going to the community going.
All this is just hard.
That's what forced the law in this way. Semi-automatic weapons that are illegal, felons are out roaming around, people who just held somebody up. I mean, those are the very people, the most likely people to violate traffic law, the people who violate all the others. You're absolutely right.
We have two council members here, Gordon Wozniak and Chris Worthington. And I'm sure that if the police came to this area, all the citations that they would give would raise so much money for the city.
That's right. That's right.
We in turn give
for you
all sorts of
absolutely, absolutely. Good for you. Good for you.
You got to get rid of the middleman. There's too many people working in that department.
Work harder, give out more.
But you know, we could have more enforcement here. Chris and I asked for, I'm sure we can get it. They won't be here all the time because there's a lot of intersections.
Sure,
and there aren't that many traffic cops.
What about cameras?
A bunch of tickets.
No,
Why not?
That's right. A bunch of tickets will really help. That's right.
Reed already talked about the state permits for drug violence.
One law, you're more likely to violate other laws. So you pull over a scooter, someone ran a red light, a stop sign, you find out that there's warrants for their arrest. And now the officer who is doing traffic enforcement is now transporting someone to jail. So
that's okay.
It's okay. Which is fine. We have
volunteers. We have 30 people here to volunteer.
So I just so we know, I mean, I want to do a plug for traffic engineering. The reason we have airbags in cars is because it's hard to change individual behavior when you don't cover it wraps. The reason we have trigger locks for guns is because it's hard to change individual behavior. The reason we ban smoking places is because it's hard to change behavior. Traffic engineers are very good at designing things to calm traffic. So I just want to really remind people of that. Right? Engineers it's hard to change behavior, particularly in Berkeley, like driver the individual. And so I just want to encourage us to not lose sight of that.
Put in the hog thing in the bike channel, which I think is a good idea. I think you should put in the bike detector, the loop detectors in the pavement a little far back, maybe where the sign is, so the lights would start flashing before you actually get there, so you don't waste as much time. You don't have to stop when you're on your bike and then wait for it's red and then cross, but you had detector like back there, like half a block or so away.
I'm going to guess you wouldn't want to just blow through Ashby.
No,
but it would be red by the time you get there.
You could avoid applying your brakes too hard.
It's going to stop at stop signs. You could discriminate between a bicyclist and people. By putting it in this area, by median, you're saying only something the size of a bicycle can activate it. The other thing is kind of speaking to that. You don't want it to be going red and sitting red and motorists stopped and not seeing somebody, because then the next time they come to it and they see red, they're like, last time I was there was nobody there, I'm just going to blow right through it. Then you've got something potentially in it. So there's little things that we'd have to look at to make
Or the bikes hitting the car.
Anyone maybe to follow up on that, again, even as we're talking, things are evolving in terms of
as I understand it, you three are representatives of the city, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I've been working on traffic in this area since, well, let's see, Chuck DeLue, Raylan Chin, the guy from Pleasanton who wouldn't stand at the corner of Benvenue and Ash because it was too dangerous and he insisted on walking in. Is it Farid now? You're Farid.
Yes, I am.
So I've talked to you on the telephone a few times. Okay. So the one thing that this city knows but hasn't addressed is from California all the way up to the Claremont Hotel, there is only one north-south side street that is open to the 3 feeders for the Caldecott Tunnel. The feeders being Alcatraz, Ashby, and Whiteway. This is the one side street that allows access to all 3 streets. This needs to be addressed. It's addressed down between California and Telegraph. It's addressed up in the neighborhood above us in from Telegraph up to the Claremont Hotel, but it's not addressed here. And your plan, you know, to put in a light is a wonderful attempt, but until you look at the whole picture, this is where the problem is, and this is why you have so many people here, and it's going to get worse unless that is somehow addressed.
What do you mean addressed?
Well, it needs to be taken care of. It hasn't been taken care of.
What do you mean taken care of? What are you talking about?
Well, do we still have problems here at this intersection or not?
I'm not arguing with you. I'm asking you what you're saying.
I'm saying that it needs to be taken care of, and it hasn't been. Every other intersection...
Yeah, that's like using a pronoun.
Well,
What do you mean by taken care of?
Every
or
other
why?
intersection has had some sort of mitigation put in on the side streets,
so
not on
what
the main
mitigation
streets.
are you talking about? Like a barrier? Is that what you're talking about?
I didn't say a thing.
Well,
I'm not a
That's what we're
traffic
asking.
engineer.
We're trying to figure out what you're
You
saying.
can ask them. The
I'm
point
asking
is
you.
that it's
You brought
their
this up.
responsibility.
We're asking you. Yeah.
But it's their responsibility because they have the knowledge, the training, and the
What have they
ability
done
to
on
do
these other
something.
Are you suggesting removing barriers?
I'm not suggesting anything other than they address the whole issue of Hillegass still being the only north-south street that's open for traffic between the 3 feeders.
Why not put in a regular traffic light? I mean, you added traffic lights like crazy on Telegraph. You know, why not put in a traffic light?
Before
That would
you
help.
arrived, we did talk about it.
Good, a lot.
So
Yeah,
just
well,
before,
I'm-
just a minute. And the historical, just to summarize, there's historical reasons why that's not our first go-to, but there are
That's good behavior. Oh my God.
I make a left. I enter here. The traffic is backed up on Ashby. I make a right. I go 1 block. I go left on the bend there. I make a left again. I make a right on Hillegass. It's ridiculous. I live here. I live here. And I have to do this every couple of days. Every time I get right on the all these streets you can drive through.
Exactly, Muffy. That's
Then
what I was
don't
talking
turn
about.
on the highway. And I keep going through, and I turn, make 1 left and 1 right on my road.
Because then everybody's going to take the street. It's hard to get across now, so they don't cross.
That's why I say
It
solve
becomes
problem.
easy to get across. Then there's going to go wrong. So it's turn I really do think we need to make it comfortable for bicyclists. And really try to cut down.
that is one of the major objectives, is to improve the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. But also an objective is not to encourage more vehicles to use this street at the expense of another street, and vice versa.
We have the ability for vehicles to go straight through, and a regular traditional traffic signal that serves vehicles conceivably would make it more desirable for them to use this street to go through. We don't necessarily want to do that. There are ways that could things that could be done to address that. Not advocating for barriers, but if you had a signal here, but a barrier block or two down of some variety, either a diverter or barrier, whatever it might be, then you would break up the ability for cars to travel straight through. Would they weave through to get around the barriers? Maybe. Bikes could still go straight through. In some neighborhoods that works. But you then are looking at the traffic flow throughout the entire neighborhood, looking around a layout that makes sense. And that's not necessarily a bad idea. It's not necessarily that it's still for this project. But what Caltrans approved so far is the crossing, safe crossing and intersection. That may not fully address the whole issue for several blocks north and south of here. So we're going to try to take the best that we can at this location. It's not very important for us that the improvements that we're studying and implementing are Ashby Ave tunnel. And I disagree with them. We initially talked about being able to do some improvements on Russell because it's the bike boulevard that allows bikes to get off of Ashby and travel parallel. And they said, well, no, that's not part of Ashby. I would contend that's part of Ashby corridor. That's people who would be using this can use an alternate area. So we're a little bit constrained in terms of, again, what Caltrans will approve, what there's sufficient funding for. But it's definitely a valid point. And anything we do, we're going to look at what the secondary consequences could be and avoid having negative impacts if at all possible.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Russell because in 2006, after they put in that light on Russell, my daughter and my wife were on a bicycle with a trail bike, and they were hit by a left turner turning from Russell onto Telegraph, which was just a few months after the light was put in. So I would argue that it didn't do so well for them.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they were okay.
Glad to hear that. So. But again, this is part of what we're looking at. Everything we do may have one benefit, may have other consequences. If we implement more restrictive measures, it's going to impact people's mobility and ability to get around in the neighborhood. I can't do things that will only stop cut-through traffic, but not stop your own neighbors from being able to get through the neighborhood when they need to. So we really are trying to balance that, and it's tricky. So that's, again, part of why we're out here. We want to hear all these things. So when Jeff and I and Eric go back to the office and try to figure out what different tools will work, we want to see which things are best addressing the issues that we're hearing out here today so we can report back on those.
Are you familiar with the point that I made, though? The only side street open? Okay, so you're aware of that. Good.
Well, I think Farita's absolutely right. I mean, one of the key considerations when we're talking about the bike boulevard network is balancing convenience of all modes and safety of all modes. So that's the puzzle that we're trying to solve.
Yes.
I really like the hawk signal idea. I think it's an elegant solution for this, but I think without barriers and without turning restrictions, you're setting up a lot of additional conflicts. Because basically you have two parallel movements of traffic following different control devices. And so, and if you're mixing them across and you're setting up conflicts. So I'd really like to see if you put the hawk signal in to really highly consider either barriers or turning restrictions. In addition to that, I think one thing you could do is also stagger where the vehicles stop. If you're able to somehow move the bikes forward and move the stop line back, you'd at least have that spatial differentiation so the bikes kind of have a head start getting across the intersection and the visibility is so thinking about the placement of vehicles as well as the
We do have, well, we're starting to implement that. We've got some designs in the works right now that are going to implement that. And basically what those do, rather than with the channelization, is we use what's called a bike box. So normally you've got your crosswalk and then say 2 feet before, 4 feet before, you've got the stop bar for cars. If you move that stop bar back 10 feet from the crosswalk, now you've got a gap in between there, and so typically we would paint that green or something, put bike symbols on it, and that's what we would call a bike box. So cars are stopped at a red light, bikes have an opportunity to pass them in the bike lane and pull into the bike box ahead of the vehicles. Gives them a head start when the light changes, and in particular where you've got a bike lane that's on the right-hand side and a left turn lane, and the bikes want to be able to get to that left turn lane, they can come up to the bike box, use that to get across, put themselves in the left turn lane so they can get going. Bikes can start up pretty quick at the start of a traffic signal, so it lets them get out there, versus if you're stopped 6 cars back, and it's a quick reacting signal, the light might turn red by the time you get there.
Like at Colby, Claremont, you're the first person getting across.
Yeah, exactly. So we're definitely looking at things like that. So the question would be, how can we sort of bring that concept to this sort of installation? And, given that we have a stop sign, not a traffic signal, what are the differences in what we can do? But there may be some things along those lines. We're definitely looking at things. Eric's been looking at every plan we've got and seeing where we need to do those sorts of things.
Citywide evaluation.
Okay.
But you can't study everything because you only got $2 million.
We are constrained, that's true. There's a lot of things that I would love to do if we had more resources, but we're going to do the best we can. And part of that is...
When can we see some action? Plenty of words here. What about action? When do we see the action?
So the first round of proposals are going to go to the Transportation Commission November 15th. We will probably have another meeting with the Transportation Commission, refining some of those proposals, completing other proposals. This one may be in draft version when it goes November 15th, but come December we'll hopefully have a more final version of that. So everyone is welcome to come to those Transportation Commission meetings. The dates are on the website, the locations. I believe we're going to be able to do the November 15th meeting here at Emerson School. So it'll at least be relatively, I'm sorry, John Muir. Thinking of a different project. So at John Muir School, we'll be able to use their auditorium to have the meeting, so it's relatively local, make it easier for people to get there and have more focused input on these specific projects. The intent is to get then the projects to Caltrans as an encroachment permit in order to be able to have the city do the work within the Caltrans right-of-way. If we're able to do that, say as early as January for some of those projects, we'd be able to get approval from them, put out requests for proposals for construction, get council authorization, go through all that process. Some of the capital work could begin this summer. Things like signing and striping we can do ourselves. We don't need to go out to contract for that. So anything that we get Caltrans approval from, say by March, if it's signing and striping that stands alone, we'll be able to just go ahead and do that as soon as the weather's dry enough to do those things. The things that require a contractor, the contract process is going to take us a couple months to get the council authorization, but we want to move those as quickly as we can. The intent is to get as much of this stuff done before the fourth floor tunnel opens up, and we'll keep on going until we've exhausted the funds, delivering as much as we can. That's part of the reason that Jeff is here, not as a city employee. He's actually working as a consultant, but that allows us to have him focused exclusively on this. I get drawn off on all kinds of other things because there's a lot of issues throughout the city, but Jeff can focus on specifically this. We got a couple of safe routes to school projects, but those are very specific projects. Day to day, he knows what he's going to be working on reliably, and so that's part of what we've done to make sure that this stays on track moving forward as much as possible.
What is Jeff's phone number?
My email's on the back. My email is on the back of the handout.
Thank you.
Jeff is very responsive.
Can you give us another email tickler on when that meeting will be open?
November 15th. It's on the website.
So if
it's actually on. It's also on the back. On the back, there's actually the staff will present recommendations of all improvements, and it's in bold, 11/15/12.
But if you've RSVP'd for this meeting or otherwise contacted Jeff that you're interested in this project, he'll be able to send you that. If you've not and you're interested, do send an email to Jeff at the email that's on the back of the handout. We want to get a good distribution list so we can keep everyone informed.
And if we want to just have reactions or thank you for such a great meeting, then we should send it to you. Or any of you can be thanked.
What I'd say right now is, if for those of you that can, thank you very much for coming. It's all great input. I haven't written down every single comment, but I've got the gist of many. I encourage you to send me formal written comments or bullet points, whatever you feel like you want to get on the record. I'm putting together a long matrix of all the comments that I received via email at all the locations, and there's actually already a page of them in here for folks who couldn't make today's meeting. And I encourage you to send me the longest, nicest email you can ever talk about what you do want to see, what you don't like to see, what you don't want to see, etc., etc.
Again, send comments, we'll document them, incorporate them, make sure that they don't get forgotten. Because I know there's a lot we're trying to cover here, and things may occur to you tonight. Oh, I should have mentioned this. we definitely want to hear those things. Also, before anyone leaves, before we further break up this meeting, I do want to take the opportunity to let everyone know about the Cal football game tomorrow night. It is going to have a lot of impact. Normally we have Saturday football games. This is a Friday football game. At the same time that people are trying to commute back home or away from work in downtown Berkeley, we've got people coming to the game. We're trying to get the word out, trying to coordinate as much. Caltrans is doing their paving work out here, and we've been pleading with them to wrap up their work tomorrow by 1 o'clock in the afternoon so they can get out of here and get traffic back to as much normalcy as we can. But definitely be aware that there's going to be some congestion in and around the areas approaching the stadium. So,
and Berkeley's first critical mass is tomorrow too, right?
Please tell me that's not true.
That's not true.
No, it was, when we heard from Caltrans, they're planning to work through 3 o'clock tomorrow. I was like, really? Are you serious? Yeah, we'll plan another Sunday streets during your next Bay Bridge closure, why don't we? So, again, I kind of feel like we heard most of the comments here. If there's anything anyone wants to add.
Better yet, you're listening.
We try.
You're way ahead of the average city.